Hey everyone, I'm Father Alexander Har,
And I'm Father David Marshall.
and today this is a bridge between, where we try to bridge the distance between two clergy. We try to bridge the distance as we move towards one liturgical season to the next. And when it comes to the gospel, Dave, we
Try to bridge ourselves to it, or it to us. Yes. Speaking of bridges, have you noticed that I'm in a different setting?
yes, you are. So where are you?
Yes. Um, well, I'm coming to you live from my 20-year-old's room. He currently is in a dormitory in University of South Florida, but I now have taken over his room. And the reason why is because there is some construction happening. It's orange cone season. And so the last time they did this, it took me over 2 hours to get off the island to get home. Speaking of bridges, so I decided to bridge early. So here I am, coming from Ethan's room, and I hope he doesn't mind.
Well, I'm sure he may charge you a fee.
Well, if we start well, you know how it is. if, if we start charging our kids. So, yeah.
So today we've got one of my favorite texts because when you go to Israel, you can actually visit where this particular story is supposed to have taken place, which is Mount Tabor, and that is when we talk about the Transfiguration. Now, what's interesting, and I know that we're going to get to the text in a minute, is that you afterwards of reading the text, you're going to tell us another way that we can think of that word, right?
I am, right, if you want. But you have some really good things to bring up too, so I don't want to.
Yeah, so let's read the text first.
Sure. So our text brings us to the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 17, and we'll read verses 1 through 8. 6 days later. We could do a whole thing on just 6 days. Anyway, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became bright as light. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah, talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will set up 3 tents here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they raised their eyes, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. Here endeth the lesson.
So the thing I love about that lesson is we sometimes, if we're not careful, because we read a lesson so often, we can discount just how intense an event can be in Scripture. And so when it talks about the disciples being overcome by fear, you and I were talking about this, and this isn't going to be one of the Greek words that we talk about or one of the translations we talk about, but they were
Right.
pretty much scared to death.
They were scared to death. Right.
And so Jesus kind of touching them is that tactile reassurance that we get from him. But there's a word that's there that's very important for us, which is transfigured.
Right.
What's the Greek word for that?
Metamorpho. Metamorpho. So if you're looking for a name for a pet or a rock band, Metamorpho, I think would be a great name. Does that word sound like any other word you might know?
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that word sounds a lot like metamorphosis.
Yes, yes, same root. And what happens with metamorphosis?
Well, in metamorphosis, we change, or something changes from one thing to another. So metamorphosis, of course, when you're a kid, you watch the caterpillar turn into the cocoon, and then from the cocoon, you go, of course, into the butterfly. And so that's the
Yep.
metamorphosis that is taking place.
Yes, exactly. And the metamorpho in this is also an aorist tense. And for those who follow our show closely, you will know it's something that happened in the past that is still occurring and will happen in the future. So Jesus had transfigured, is transfiguring, or I would say has metamorphosed, is metamorphosing, and will metamorpho. That he is in this process or changing. And so when you think of metamorphosis and you think of um, the caterpillar and you see it changing into a butterfly and then it ends, the idea is that this doesn't end, that it is still ongoing now.
Right. And that's what I love about this particular text is that when we begin to talk about Jesus transfiguring, if you don't mind, I'm going to use transfigure instead of
That's fine. Metamorpho, right?
Is Jesus is getting this glimpse, I think, of what is going to be the fulfillment of everything he's going to experience next, which is, of course, going to Jerusalem and dying, and not just dying, but being tortured and crucified. But before that, he gets this glimpse of this glory, of this glorified body, of what is awaiting him on the other side of the resurrection. And so that's one of the things that I love, because it shows that there is a process and that Jesus is being given a glimpse of the next stage of that process after the suffering.
Mm-hmm. And I take it from a different angle, and that is the tellers of the story are actually the ones that metamorphosed, that they're the ones who finally saw Jesus for who he is. And that Paul uses metamorpho twice in his letters, one to the Romans, one his second letter to the Corinthians. And he talks about it in a way that we metamorpho in our minds, that by casting our thoughts onto Jesus and to imitating him, that we are the ones that metamorpho, that we are the ones that start to shine like the sun. And that, so I like to think of it as the disciples were the ones that suddenly saw him for who he is. And when they see him, Moses represents the law, Elijah represents the prophets. And so now Jesus, for their entirety, is representing the law and the prophets, and God says, "Listen to him." Right? It's this incredible, overwhelming experience that then brings in the second Greek word, the haptu, and that is that Jesus touched them. But it's one of these really kind of neat Greek words where it can mean a variety of different things, particularly to grasp or to ignite or to cook. And so we could translate it that they were scared to death and Jesus cooked them. And it's an aorist tense. So he cooked, is cooking, and will cook them, right? The idea is that Jesus's touch has transformed them the way that cooking transforms food, the way that the igniting of something transforms a fire. It's that sense of this really tactile. Jesus grasped them and is grasping, that he's transfiguring them, he's metamorphosing them through his touch. And so Matthew does this masterful job of bringing in metamorpho and haptu and tying these two things together, that they saw what they saw with Jesus, and now inside they too are being transformed or metamorphosed, which I think gives us some good news, right?
Well, yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned in pastoral ministry and also in my own spiritual life is that there are many times when human beings seek to be transformed.
Yeah.
They recognize where they are, that it's not where they want to be, or they recognize that there's something distinctly wrong. And they seek what we might call in this context transformation or fulfillment. When Jesus looks ahead to what is going to be the fulfillment of his ministry, the fulfillment of his life, he sees transformation. When we see Jesus, I believe that we also see an opportunity for fulfillment, because we are works in progress.
Yes.
As human beings. But there is that moment, and I think Paul talks a little bit about this, when human beings become a new creation, or when a person has a conversion experience. I think it's very relevant to go back to that aorist tense, because if, as a Christian, I desire to be transformed, and I may have this moment of conversion where God spoke to me or reached out to me, or something happened where I said to myself, I really want to change. But then it doesn't stop there. I'm called to continue changing. I'm called to continue growing. And I'll grow, you know, until I die, and then there's a whole other kind of growing that's
There's
going
a
to
whole different type of growing,
a
right?
whole other kind of growing that takes place. And so um, I like to think of this as good news because we're talking to people and saying Jesus represents and embodies transformation.
Yeah.
And as a human being, he's saying, you too can be transformed, and I will transform, I will grasp you,
Hmm.
and I will transform you.
Yeah. Um, you and I both have children, and it's interesting in the Bible, and we'll bring it up again, that Jesus tells people all around him to go and to do this and to do that, except when it comes to children. With children, he doesn't tell them, he just holds them. And it's because children are constantly changing. Uh, when we get to adults, we tend to get stuck in our own ways. And so Jesus has to force us out of that. But children are always growing and metamorphosing, if you will. You and I have both been definitely blessed to be able to see our children metamorpho, and and it's also they aren't who they were. They is, and they will be, right, that they aren't where they're, it's this liminal time that they haven't fully completed. And as you had mentioned, we never do really until we die, and then the whole process starts over again.
And so one of the things that I kind of want to bring up is January, February is the time of year where a lot of churches are casting a new vision.
Mm-hmm.
They're talking about the beginning of the year and saying, what do we want to embody? What do we want to accomplish? And to me, it's also a time of saying, how do we want to be transformed?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I wish I could reach into the heart of every person in the church, in my parish, in every parish, and just remind them, this is that God can transform anybody at any time. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter how old we feel or how old we are,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter. I have seen people who have been transformed by Jesus's love at 90,
Oh yeah.
and they get up and they are a go-getter. They just want to do for Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also seen people who are young who feel stuck in their ways and they
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to be transformed. And we point them back to Jesus.
We do. We do. So if you notice, I've been shifting a bit in my seat, and you may have actually heard a cat cry. Our cat Jelly Bean has entered the room, and I'm not used to having cats show up in my office. And he is wondering why I'm here and where Ethan is. And I don't know if you can see him on the bed. There he is.
There you
He's
go.
cleaning himself. So yeah, that's that's not a nice position anyway. But that's Jelly Bean.
He's
We got Jelly Bean when he was young, and we've been watching him transform. He was a scared little kitten, and now he is thinking that this is his room because Ethan is now in college, and so
well. I mean that's that. So the other side of it, to kind of turn it on its table with what we were talking about before, is we as parents look at our children, and we're looking on the outside
yeah.
in, just kind of watching the transformation.
Mm-hmm.
God does the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
God is looking and seeing how we grow and change and transform. And there's an image that I love about Jesus that somebody was telling me one time, because they said, why doesn't Jesus do this, or why doesn't God do that? And I said, well, because we have free will. I said,
Mm-hmm.
there's times I think that Jesus is kind of right behind us, kind of like holding some hands out, going like, I'll catch you, I'll catch you, because I remember my son learning how to walk. And for those of you who've never seen a child learn how to walk, it's a really fun experience because they think they're doing all the work.
Yeah.
They're taking the steps, they're grabbing the table, they're doing these things, but the parents are the ones in the background, configuring couch cushions and holding these hands out to, okay, you do the walking, but I will be here to catch you. And I think that that's one of my images of God being behind me and around me, waiting to catch when I do fall.
Mm-hmm. So have your children transformed more than you have transformed being their dad?
Oh, that's a good
I
question.
know, right? Because I'm trying to imagine myself before being a dad, and now, and it is definitely a metamorpho, and it continues. That Because we're not static. It's not that we're always the same and our kids just get older. No, no, we're in this interesting constant change. Um, so that
I think,
that got me thinking on a whole separate a whole separate line.
well, I don't know. I mean, I think that the younger you are, the more transformation is taking place. But I have changed so much in what I understand of the world because I'm
Mhm.
looking at it through the kids' eyes
That too. Yeah.
in the last 2 years, just because,
Hmm.
getting teenagers in the last 3 years or so.
Yeah.
That has just dramatically changed how I perceive the world,
Hmm.
and my role in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so I think maybe the lesson should be that I should be continuing to transform and transfigure, um, so I don't get left behind.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, the other part is that not having seen my dad for a while, my dad passed away last year, but and watching the cancer change him from the inside, that watching the metamorpho of me seeing him for not seeing him because of COVID, that he suddenly was much older than I had remembered, and older in the negative term of not being able to, he used to box and do all sorts of stuff, and that he wasn't doing that as much at all. And that um, then remembering that I too am not remaining static, that as our parents age and pass, that we are just like Peter and James and John, we're just watching transformation occur, and Jesus is still igniting in us, cooking us, um, and and with us in every step and stage of life.
So before we end, because I think this is a good part to end that part of the
Mhm.
discussion, we need to look ahead to what's happening after this moment of transfiguration. So what's next in the year liturgically?
Well, I'm contacting the bishop because I'm not done with Epiphany. So I'm just going to keep going with Epiphany. In fact, the parting planning committee that met on Sunday afternoon in my office, they're like, can we just extend Epiphany through Lent for a while? Can we just go from Epiphany right to Easter? And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. Um, no, we can't.
I was going to say, please let me read that reply to the email because I really want to read it.
Right. Right. Just like how Peter wanted to stay up on the mountain, right? Let me make 3 tents. Like, I just want to stay here. I don't want to go anywhere else, right? I love Epiphany. I want to stay in the season, but we are going to go through Ash Wednesday, where we receive the mark of the ashes of the forehead, and to remind us that we are dust. Speaking of metamorpho, and to dust we return. And then we enter into the penitential season of Lent, where we will look probably more at free will, more at our state that needs to be fulfilled, and some some good stuff around there too.
Yeah, Ash Wednesday is, I think, a very powerful day.
Mhm.
And it always, to me, it's not just the beginning of Lent, it's the beginning of this time of transformation, as we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I think it signals to people it's okay to enter into that time. It's okay to be thinking about that as kind of
Mhm.
a good liturgical signal. So I'm looking forward to talking about some of the heavy stuff of Lent and temptation and all those things that Jesus is going to experience.
Yeah. And at the same time, understanding that we experience the same things. And
Well, in that we look ahead, sorry for the cross section of the nose there, but we look ahead towards what's going to come after Lent, which is Holy Week, and then, of course, the celebration of Easter.
yes,
So that's where we're going to be looking towards. So we've got a lot of episodes ahead of us.
we do. And for those that have said, when you guys wrapping this up, we want you to continue. No, we're planning on continuing. At least I sure enjoy talking with you, Alex, and you are helping me with preaching and all the rest. So
Same here. I'm looking forward to it as well, and I appreciate the ministry that you're exercising with me. Um,
and mostly I appreciate your friendship.
well, of course, I appreciate your friendship as well, and you keep me grounded while at the same time making me really think about things.
Nice.
Good combination.
And you help me metamorpho.
And I will just ask that you do not cook me. So so thanks everyone for watching this episode, and leave a comment, either on Facebook or on YouTube. I'm always checking the comments. I'm always trying to reply. And if you've got a suggestion about something that we haven't talked about, or just about how to make these episodes better, let us know.
Yeah, or you can take a 3x5 card, write your comment, and put it onto the top of a large pizza and send it to Alex. You could do that too. So
I don't know if I need to eat more pizza, but I will accept all forms of pizza. Yes.
nice.
Well, thanks, Dave, and thanks everyone for watching.
God bless.
God bless.